Could the biggest player in the history of the NBA be on his way to the league soon? Well, that could very well happen if Olivier Rioux could find his way to the NBA. At just 18 years old, Rioux stands 7 feet 9 inches and is said to be the tallest teenager in the world. There's no doubt that he's a towering presence, a giant in many ways. But that's not always an assurance that he'd one day become the next big thing in the NBA. So, if you want to know more about Olivier Rioux, stick around to the end of the video as we explore this giant's chances at making it to the big leagues. We all know that basketball is a tall person's game because the taller you are, the easier it will be for you to reach the rim. That's why some of the best players of all time are the tallest as well. The league has seen its fair share of giants roaming the paint and dominating every era. Whether it's Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Shaquille O'Neal, or Joel Embiid, 7-footers always find themselves in the league.
Embiid fakes, Embiid down the lane!
But what about guys standing well over 7 feet tall? Well, we've seen our fair share of giants in the league. The tallest player ever is George Muresan, followed by Manute Bol. Both were listed at 7 feet 7 inches, though Muresan was supposedly slightly taller than Bol. Of course, we can't forget about the legendary Yao Ming, the 7 foot 6 inch Chinese giant who is often regarded as the best player standing 7 foot 5 or over. With the exception of Yao, however, giants in the NBA tend to have trouble staying in the league or playing well. That's because taller players are a lot slower and less mobile. Their legs aren't built to handle all the stress that basketball knees tend to endure every game. That's why it's hard to find a player standing at least 7 foot 4 but moves with the grace of a shorter player or is actually fluid enough to run the floor well. Yao used to be that guy because he wasn't just a giant but was actually skilled and fluid as well. Of course, we do have Victor Wembanyama showcasing what a skilled and mobile 7 foot 4 player can do. The alien is said to be the future of the NBA, and there's a good reason for that.
12 for Middleton. Wembanyama. Oh, goes back!
He's not only incredibly tall, but also has the skills of a guard and the mobility of a forward. This is why the league is so high on him right now, as he's set to dominate the NBA for years to come, as long as he's healthy. But while we're already impressed with Wemby's 7'4" frame, there's a chance that he could be literally looking up to someone else for the first time in his career. That's because there's this young 18-year-old named Olivier Rioux. The Canadian young man is a genetic freak by any standards. His parents may be tall, but they're not even over 7 feet tall. But he eventually won the genetic lottery as he was already 6'10" when he was just 12 years old. He never stopped growing. By the time he was 15, Rioux was already a full inch taller than Wemb and an inch shorter than Yao. He was named the tallest teenager in the world by Guinness World Records, and he's yet to relinquish that distinction. At 18 years old, he's currently 7 feet 9, growing 4 whole inches in the last 4 years. That means he's currently taller than any NBA player ever. He's at least 2 inches taller than Muresan and Bol. On top of that, he's the same height as Sun Mingming, the tallest basketball player in the world. The scary part is that he's just 18 years old, and we do know that boys don't stop growing until they're 21. It's likely that he could grow an inch or two in the future, putting him closer to Sultan Kosen, the tallest person in the world, at nearly 8 feet 3 inches. But the thing about Rioux is that he doesn't seem to have the illness that we've seen in some of the tallest players in the world, or even the tallest people in general. Most people grow up to become incredibly tall because of a genetic disease. But in Rioux's case, it looks like he isn't afflicted by a serious medical condition. After all, he's been playing basketball at a high level. At high school, Rioux started at IMG Academy, one of the best basketball programs in the country. He doesn't have impressive numbers, but he showed promise as a big man, especially because he doesn't even need to jump high to dunk. He was even impressive for Canada's youth team, with averages of 8.3 points and 10.3 rebounds per game during the 2021 FIBA Under-16 Americas Championship in Mexico. In the 2024 Under-18 AmeriCup, he finished the event averaging 4.5 points and 4.5 rebounds per game. That means that he's not a bumbling giant, but is actually capable of putting up good numbers. This is the surprising part about this giant. In most cases, players standing over 7'5" have trouble staying on the floor because they lack the mobility and fluidity of a high-level athlete. You don't see many tall players who are coordinated enough to actually contribute well, and that's where Rioux may stand out. Though he was only a 3-star recruit coming out of high school, a lot of colleges were willing enough to take him because he's actually capable of playing. He committed to the Florida Gators as he's set to showcase what he can do at the collegiate level against players who may be shorter but faster than him. But the thing about Rioux is that NBA scouts are actually eyeing him right now. The current consensus about him is that he can actually get up and down the court without showing any signs of long-term problems. As expected, he's a slow player, and that's something that comes with the territory of being freakishly tall. Not everyone can be Victor Wembanyama, after all. Scouts also love the fact that he doesn't need to jump to block shots, dunk the ball, or rebound misses. He's also got a ton of strength at 300 pounds, making it hard to move him around in the paint. That means that he's not a twig who lacks strength. Rioux is actually a well-built giant who comes with height, strength, and a bit of mobility. Still, are those enough for him to get to the NBA? Well, if this was the 80s or 90s, he'd be a sure first-round pick. After all, we've seen a ton of freakishly tall players getting drafted and even earning minutes in the past. Murison himself was incredibly slow and uncoordinated. Meanwhile, Ball didn't have any basketball skills at all. And Sean Bradley, at 7'6", became a top rim protector during his prime. But that was in the past. Today, the game demands its players to be fast, fluid, and skilled. You see 7-footers running the floor like gazelles and hitting three-pointers. It's no longer enough to be more than 7 feet tall because you actually have to run well and have a high level of skill. Players who can't move well or shoot the ball tend to get hunted. We even see perimeter players forcing the 7'1" Rudy Gobert to switch out on the perimeter because he's not a very mobile player. He's also regarded as an offensive liability because he can't do anything but dunk. So if that's the case, just imagine what they would do with someone who's as slow as Rioux. It's never going to be easy fielding someone his size because you know that opposing teams are going to force him out to the perimeter on both ends of the floor. This is also the exact reason why Taco Fall never lasted long enough in the NBA. Fall was actually great in college because his 7'6" was incredibly useful at blocking shots and grabbing rebounds. He was also a pretty solid athlete for someone his size. But he never lasted long in the NBA because he's far too raw on offense and far too slow to keep up with opposing players. And that's a guy who spent 4 years honing his skills in college. In Rioux's case, he'd probably be another Taco Fall if he can't develop any meaningful skills that would allow him to stay in the league. He's never going to be quick because that's the physical limitation of being as big as he is. But that doesn't mean that he can't develop his skill set. He's been playing basketball for a long time, and that means he's probably worked on his fundamentals, such as his jump shots and hooks. Imagine a 7'9" player facing up and hitting jumpers from the perimeter. Not even the tallest players in the league could guard that shot. So far, however, we haven't seen what he's truly capable of because he's still somewhat raw. That means he's probably going to spend 2 to 4 years in college to hone his skills and work on his fundamentals. He's probably going to get drafted because there's going to be a team willing enough to spend a roster spot for a guy his size because there's always a small chance that he could become a good player with proper training and coaching. After all, you can teach skills, but not height. If that's the case, then Rioux will eventually become the tallest player in the history of the league. But in terms of his longevity, there's always going to be a challenge for someone his size. It's going to be difficult for a 7'9" player to take the continuous pounding of 82 games of high-level basketball. Sure, he probably won't play 30 minutes a night and 82 games, but teams would still want to make sure that he's built well enough to handle the grind. At this point, though, it looks like Olivier Rioux is set to follow the Taco Fall trajectory in the sense that he's a borderline NBA player and more than a novelty. But he still has a chance to prove these allegations wrong, especially if he works hard on his game and plays well enough in the collegiate ranks.